They wanted me to cry, to collapse, to beg, to give them the show they'd been rehearsing for weeks. But when my mother-in-law handed me divorce papers at my own birthday dinner, surrounded by cameras and laughter, I didn't shed a single tear. I signed them, smiled, and in that exact moment, they had no idea I was already free. For my 31st birthday, Margaret, my elegant, calculating mother-in-law, gave me divorce papers. She said it like a toast. From all of us. David, my husband, was recording my reaction on his phone. Emma, his sister, held hers up too, pretending it was for memories. I thanked Margaret softly, signed my name with perfect handwriting, and stood up. No tears, no shouting, just the sound of my pen gliding across the line. She blinked, confused. Because the thing about people like Margaret is they don't know what to do when you don't break the way they expect. I still remember how it smelled that night, garlic and wine from the kitchen, the low hum of conversations, the faint jazz playing through Romano's speakers. It should have been a celebration. Instead, it was an ambush. The moment she lifted that pale pink envelope, butterflies embossed, "Happy Birthday" in silver script, I already knew. I'd seen it before. 3 days earlier, I'd caught her at our kitchen table, hunched over paperwork, glasses low on her nose, red pen in hand. She'd looked up at me, startled, then smiled with a sweetness that almost felt like pity. "Just some family paperwork, dear," she'd said. She had never called me dear before. Usually, I was David's wife. Or, if she was feeling generous, just she. That morning, sunlight spilled across the marble counter, turning her reading glasses into little mirrors. She gathered the papers quickly, sliding them into a pastel envelope, the same one she would hand me 3 days later like a gift. It was the speed that gave her away, the way her hands trembled, not with guilt, but with anticipation. I remember thinking, why is she so excited about paperwork? That evening, she was oddly cheerful, humming as she cooked, pretending to ask about my day at Romano's. For a woman who once said, "A waitress is just a servant with better lighting," her sudden warmth felt wrong, like a smile stretched over something sharp. When David came home, they shared that silent communication again, the kind I'd learned to recognize but never understand. A glance, a nod, a wordless conspiracy. I told myself not to overthink it, that maybe, after 2 years of marriage, Margaret was finally trying. But the truth was already sitting in her purse, sealed with butterflies. 3 days later, we sat in the restaurant where I worked, my second home, my refuge. Mr. Romano had trained me himself. Maria, our head cook, had become my confidant. This place had witnessed every moment I felt invisible in that family. And tonight, it would witness the end of it. When Margaret reached into her bag with that same pastel envelope, time seemed to slow. David lifted his phone, pretending to capture my surprise. Emma giggled behind her glass of wine. The envelope looked innocent, silver lettering, expensive paper, a faint scent of her perfume. If I didn't know better, I might have believed it was love. She said, "From all of us," like she was giving jewelry. Then she smiled that perfect rehearsed smile and slid the envelope across the table. I opened it. The words, "Petition for dissolution of marriage," glared up at me like a cruel joke. For a heartbeat, the room disappeared. The laughter, the music, the clinking dishes, all gone. Just me, and the legal weight of a family that never wanted me. Margaret's voice broke the silence. "Well, dear, say something." So I did. I signed. "Thank you," I said. "This is actually the most generous gift you could have given me." She blinked the first crack in her armor as I slid the papers back into her manicured hands. Because while they'd been planning my humiliation, I'd been planning my escape. And none of them knew it yet. 3 days before my birthday, I woke early, the house still wrapped in that fragile quiet before dawn. The smell of coffee hadn't even reached the air yet. Our kitchen was normally my sanctuary, warm light, soft hum of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the clock. But that morning, something felt wrong. Margaret was there. She sat at the table in her cream silk robe, reading glasses perched low on her nose. Legal-sized papers covered the table like fallen leaves, pages filled with heavy language and official stamps. She didn't notice me at first. Her pen moved quickly, red ink circling sentences, adding notes in tidy, sharp handwriting. The sound of my footsteps made her look up, And for one split second, I saw its satisfaction. Not the kind born from accomplishment, but the kind that glows when someone finally gets what they want. She recovered instantly. The pen clicked shut, papers stacked in a practiced motion. "Oh, good morning, dear." Dear. The word felt foreign coming from her lips, too sweet, too careful, like a mask that didn't quite fit. "What are you working on?" I asked lightly, reaching for the coffee pot. She smiled, a brittle, polished thing. "Just some family paperwork. Nothing for you to worry about." Family paperwork. She slid the pages into a pink envelope, her fingers tracing its silver butterflies as if admiring her own cleverness. Then she looked up at me, eyes glinting. "I picked this one especially for you." She said it like a compliment, but it landed like a warning. When David came downstairs, already in his pressed shirt and cologne, he kissed my cheek, glanced at his mother, and said, "Don't peek at your surprise." They exchanged that look again, silent, loaded. I felt like a child at a table where the adults spoke another language. I wanted to believe this sudden sweetness meant peace. For 2 years, I'd tried to belong, smiling through every dinner where I was introduced as David's wife who works in the service industry. Every remark disguised as kindness, every comparison to girls from proper families. Maybe, I thought, she was finally trying. Maybe this family paperwork was something good, a trust fund, property transfer, maybe even something about the house. But deep down, I knew better. Margaret didn't give gifts, she gave lessons. That evening, I found the same envelope in her purse while helping clear the dining room after dinner. It peeked from the leather edge, pink, silver, too delicate for anything serious. I almost asked, almost. But Margaret's eyes met mine across the room, calm, unblinking, daring me to question her. So I smiled instead and said nothing. The next few days, she turned almost maternal. She called twice to ask about my work schedule, her tones syrupy, her voice lilting. "I just want to be sure you're free for dinner on your birthday," she said. "I think it's time we celebrate you properly." The words should have warmed me, but they crawled down my spine instead. Even Emma started acting different. The same woman who'd once called me our charity project now texted heart emojis and offered to help plan something special. Their niceness felt like velvet over a knife. David seemed genuinely excited, though. He'd hum while scrolling his phone, replying to secret messages that made him smile. When I'd ask who it was, he'd grin and say, "You'll see, it's a surprise." By midweek, I convinced myself I was paranoid. Margaret was changing. The family was finally accepting me. Maybe I'd been too defensive all this time, too quick to assume malice where there was only awkwardness. So when she called again, voice warm and careful, "Wear something nice, but not too formal, dear. You'll want to be comfortable for what we have planned." I actually smiled. That night, as I hung up the phone, I caught my reflection in the dark window. I looked hopeful. It scared me a little. Because somewhere deep in my chest, a small voice whispered, "She's setting the stage." And the worst part? I was walking right into it, thinking it was a party. When people ask how a family breaks someone without ever raising their voice, I always think of Margaret. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens over dinners, over smiles, over the soft pressure of, "We're just trying to help." You don't even realize you're shrinking until one day, you can't remember what your own laughter sounds like. The first time I understood what she was capable of was at David's cousin Michael's graduation party 6 months after our wedding. I remember how long I'd spent choosing the right dress, conservative, black, simple gold earrings. I wanted to blend in, to be the kind of daughter-in-law Margaret could show off. The house smelled of lilies and white wine, the chatter of people who all seemed to know exactly where they belonged. When we walked in, Margaret took my arm gently, the way a mother might. Then she led me to a cluster of well-dressed women. "This is David's wife," she announced brightly. "She works in the service industry." The pause before service industry was deliberate, a quiet assassination of dignity. Aunt Patricia raised her eyebrows. One of the cousins smiled too sweetly. "What kind of service?" someone asked, pretending curiosity. Before I could answer, Margaret jumped in. "Oh, she's still figuring things out, taking time to find something suitable." They all nodded, approving, pitying. and I smiled like it didn't hurt. That night, I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection until the party noise blurred into a single muffled hum. I whispered, "Don't let her see you cry." I meant it, but I also meant, don't let her win. Over the next year, her words became needles, disguised as kindness. At Thanksgiving, she said, "It's so inspiring that you're working your way up. Reminds me of when I volunteered at church, hard work, humble beginnings." At Christmas, she gave me a book wrapped in old newspaper, Professional Success for Women. Inside the front cover, she'd written, "For when you're ready to take that next step." Everyone laughed politely. I smiled until my jaw ached. David never saw it or pretended not to. "She's just old-fashioned," he'd say, rubbing my shoulder. "She doesn't mean it that way." But he didn't stop her, not once. By the second Christmas, even my clothes had become a talking point. "You always wear such comfortable things," Margaret said one evening, her tone perfectly neutral. "I suppose style isn't as important in your line of work." Emma snorted into her champagne glass. I laughed too, because what else could I do? There was a rhythm to it, Margaret's performance and my compliance. She'd smile, deliver the insult, then pivot to something cheerful. "Oh, have you tried the cranberry sauce, dear?" And I'd nod, my throat tight, pretending not to notice the audience watching our silent duel. Every holiday blurred together. Every family dinner felt like a test I was always failing. She'd talk about David's achievements in accounting, Emma's fiancé, their new house, all while I sat there invisible. If I spoke, she'd interrupt. If I stayed quiet, she'd sigh. Even my silence became an offense. Once, after a dinner party, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. "She's just not polished," she whispered. "Sweet, maybe, but she lowers David's standing. He deserves better." I stood frozen in the dark, holding my shoes in my hand, afraid to breathe. It was the first time I understood that Margaret didn't dislike me, she wanted me gone. And little by little, I started believing she was right. I began measuring my worth by her reactions, what she approved, what she dismissed. If she said my job was temporary, I told myself it had to be. If she implied my degree didn't matter, I stopped mentioning it. By the time our second anniversary arrived, I had become smaller, quieter, hungrier for her approval, even when I swore I didn't care. Looking back now, I realize how deliberate it all was. She didn't just want to destroy my marriage. She wanted to make me erase myself first, so when I finally disappeared, no one would notice. And for a long time, it worked. There's a kind of silence that follows humiliation, not the loud, angry kind, but the soft, hollow one that hums under your skin. By the second year of our marriage, I lived inside that silence. Margaret had taught me how to smile through it. David had taught me how to pretend it wasn't there. One night, after another dinner where everyone talked over me like I was furniture, I sat in our dark kitchen scrolling through job listings. Administrative assistant, entry-level analyst, junior account coordinator. Every one of them demanded what I didn't have: degrees, certifications, experience. All I had was 3 years at Romano's restaurant, a high school diploma, and a smile that could survive almost anything. Almost. I told myself I wasn't doing it for Margaret, but maybe, deep down, I was. Maybe I needed her to see that I was trying, that I wasn't the failure she painted me to be. So, I made a promise to myself. I'd build something. A career, a future, anything that didn't fit inside her definition of unworthy. My laptop became my confessional. Resume templates, job boards, late-night cover letters written in between tears. I rewrote the same line 5 times until it sounded like success. Managed multiple client relationships while maintaining high satisfaction under pressure. It meant waiting tables, smiling through insults, and memorizing a dozen drink orders while my feet ached, but that didn't sound professional enough for Margaret's world. The first rejection came within hours. The second, the next morning. By the end of the week, I had 13. David tried to help at first, kind words, shoulder rubs, the occasional, "You'll get there." But every rejection seemed to confirm something in him too, that maybe his mother had been right all along. "You're being too picky," he said one evening, watching me edit my resume again. "They're all just entry-level jobs. I replied quietly. I'm not turning anything down. He sighed. Maybe you should stick with Romano's. It's stable. You're good at it. And Tenexta. Stable. That was his word for settle. When I enrolled in night classes at the community college, Margaret called it cute. You're finally learning some real-world skills, she said. Business basics, isn't it? You'll love it, they start from the beginning. Her laugh stayed in my ears the whole bus ride to class. The first week was brutal. Most of my classmates were already working professionals, fluent in a language I was just starting to learn. They spoke about networking, quarterly reports, and growth strategy. I spoke about coffee refills and table numbers. Still, I sat in the front row, taking notes until my wrist cramped. Professor Martinez, kind-eyed and patient, once said to me after class, "You've got something the others don't, empathy. You can't teach that." That night, I cried on the bus home, not from sadness, but from relief. Someone saw me again. But at home, that light always dimmed. David would ask how class went without looking up from his phone. Margaret would call every Thursday evening, asking if I'd found something real yet. And each time, I'd feel smaller. It was like trying to grow flowers in concrete. By spring, the rejection folder on my desktop had become its own graveyard. Each email was polite and devastating. "We've decided to move forward with other candidates." It didn't matter that I'd rewritten my resume a dozen times, that I'd bought thrift store blazers to look more professional. All that mattered was what I didn't have: a degree, a network, a last name that opened doors. Margaret's voice was right there in my head. Some people just aren't built for professional life. I started to believe her. One night, after another failed interview, I came home to find David watching TV, relaxed, smiling at his phone. He didn't even look up when I said I didn't get the job. "That's okay," he said. "Maybe next time." His calmness felt cruel, not because he meant it, but because he didn't understand the cost of trying. Trying meant hope. Hope meant pain. And I was running out of both. At Romano's, I worked double shifts to keep us afloat. Mr. Romano noticed my exhaustion. "Jennifer, you can't keep this pace forever," he said softly one afternoon. "I'm fine," I lied. But even Maria, our head cook, wasn't fooled. "Don't let anyone make you ashamed of honest work," she told me, sliding me an extra plate of pasta. "You give your best here. That's already worth something." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Because somewhere deep inside, I wanted more than worth something. I wanted to be enough. The night before everything changed, I sat at the table, surrounded by rejection letters and homework. Margaret's words played in my head like a hymn. David deserves someone who enhances his life, not holds him back. For the first time, I whispered the reply I'd been swallowing for months. Then maybe he deserves someone else. And that's when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number. A woman's voice, warm, calm, professional. "Hello, is this Jennifer Walsh?" That call would change everything I thought I knew about my worth, my future, and the power of timing. When the phone rang that afternoon, I almost didn't answer. Unknown number, probably another rejection, or worse, a telemarketer asking if I'd consider upgrading my plan. But something in me, a flicker of instinct I hadn't felt in months, said, "Pick up." "Hello, is this Jennifer Walsh?" The voice was calm, warm, professional, the kind that carried authority without arrogance. "This is Jessica Martinez from Grand Plaza Hotel. I'm calling regarding your application for the guest services coordinator position." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. That application was 6 months old, something I'd sent during the darkest winter nights when I still believed miracles might happen. Yes, I stammered. "Yes, that's me." Jessica chuckled gently, a sound that carried no judgment. "I hope I'm not calling at a bad time." It wasn't just a good time. It was salvation disguised as a phone call. She continued, "We were impressed by your experience at Romano's restaurant. Honestly, it stood out. Candidates who understand people the way you do often excel in hospitality management." I stared at the kitchen counter, the unpaid bills, the chipped mug, the half-folded laundry, trying to process the words. She wasn't apologizing for my background. She was valuing it. No one had done that in years. We'd love to schedule a call this week to discuss the opportunity further, Jessica said. Would Thursday afternoon work? My voice shook. Yes, yes, of course. When she hung up, I just sat there, phone in hand, tears slipping down my cheeks. Not loud sobs, just quiet, steady tears. Because for the first time in months, someone had seen me. I replayed every word in my head. We were impressed. You understand people, hospitality management. Each phrase felt like sunlight on frozen ground. That night, I didn't tell David. Or Margaret. I wanted it to be mine, a secret seed of hope, protected from their cynicism. While they talked about Emma's wedding plans on the family group chat, I researched Grand Plaza Hotel. 5-star, ocean view property, corporate training programs, employee housing. It sounded unreal, a different world entirely from Romano's crowded dining room. Thursday came, and I sat cross-legged on the bed, laptop open, notepad ready, heart pounding. When Jessica's number appeared, I whispered a silent prayer to no one in particular. The call lasted 20 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime condensed into grace. She asked about customer conflict, multitasking, time management. I told her stories from Romano's, the time I diffused an argument between guests, the night we handled a surprise wedding party with no warning. She laughed at my humor, praised my composure, called me resourceful. Then came the words I'll never forget. Jennifer, we'd like to formally offer you the position, starting salary $45,000, plus benefits and housing. You'll be managing guest services under our training program. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I looked at the ceiling, the worn edges of our wallpaper, the fading sunlight over the sink, all the small reminders of limitation, and I smiled. Not because it was over, but because I knew I was stepping out of the cage. Thank you, I whispered. You have no idea what this means. Jessica paused. Actually, she said softly, I think I do. After the call, I printed the offer letter 3 times. One for my purse, one for my drawer, one for my heart. I pressed my hand against the paper, my name printed in bold, professional letters, and let myself breathe for the first time in months. That night at Romano's, everything felt different. The clatter of dishes, the laughter of customers, Maria's humming, it all sounded like music again. When Mr. Romano asked, You seem lighter today, something good happen? I smiled. Something unexpected. He nodded knowingly. Good things always find the people who don't stop working. I wanted to tell him everything, how his letter of reference had helped, how his belief in me had built the foundation I was standing on. But I kept it close, like a secret power. Because 3 days later, Margaret would hand me that pink envelope, expecting me to fall apart. And I would have the most powerful weapon imaginable, proof that I didn't need any of them to define my worth. That week, I practiced what I would say when I revealed the news. Not to gloat, but to reclaim the voice they'd spent years silencing. I even bought a new navy blue dress for my birthday dinner. The fabric felt like confidence, clean lines, soft strength. I imagined Margaret's face when she'd hear, I got an offer from Grand Plaza Hotel, with housing, with benefits, with freedom. The irony was perfect. While they were planning my destruction, I was quietly building my escape. When I looked in the mirror that night, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time, not fear, not exhaustion, but the beginning of a woman who could walk away without flinching. And soon, I'd get my chance. When David called that Wednesday morning, his voice carried a rehearsed excitement. Mom wants to take you out for your birthday tomorrow, he said. She suggested Romano's, your favorite place. He sounded proud, like a husband announcing good news. I smiled into the phone, even though something inside me whispered careful. Romano's? I asked. That's surprising. She wants to celebrate you, he said warmly. She said it's time we acknowledge how hard you've been working. For a split second, I believed him. The idea that Margaret, the same woman who once called my uniform embarrassingly domestic, wanted to celebrate me was almost laughable. But hope, even foolish hope, is hard to kill. Maybe she'd seen me changing. Maybe she could sense that something in me had shifted. I hung up the phone and stood in the middle of our kitchen, sunlight spilling across the counter, feeling that strange mix of anticipation and dread. It was my birthday, after all. And I had my own surprise waiting in the drawer, the crisp folded job offer letter from Grand Plaza Hotel. That evening, I opened the jewelry box where I'd tucked it away. The paper felt almost sacred. Every line, every number, every signature was proof that I was no longer the woman they thought they could destroy. I imagined the scene, the candles, the polite applause, and then my moment. I actually have an announcement of my own. I'd unfold the letter, smile, and watch their expressions twist from satisfaction to disbelief. I laughed softly to myself. Happy birthday to me. The next day, I let myself indulge not for them, but for the version of me who had fought for this moment. I booked a hair appointment with Sandra, the same stylist who'd seen me through every heartbreak. As she worked, she said, "You're glowing today." "What's his name?" "No one's name," I smiled. "Just mine." She laughed, curling the last strand into soft waves that framed my face like a new beginning. Back home, I tried on outfits like I was shedding old skins. Pastel? Too delicate. Black? Too somber. Then I found the navy dress sleek, quiet, powerful. It fit like confidence itself. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see Margaret's insecure daughter-in-law. I saw a woman about to walk into her own rebirth. Even David noticed. "You look incredible," he said, adjusting his tie. "Big night," I replied, slipping the envelope into my purse. He smiled, but his eyes darted to his phone again, always checking, always waiting for something unseen. A text buzzed. He typed back quickly, face unreadable. I pretended not to notice, but a faint nausea stirred in my stomach. The drive to Romano's was quiet, almost cinematic, late evening sun bleeding through the windshield, the hum of the road, my reflection in the glass. David tapped his fingers on the steering wheel, humming to the radio. "Everyone's excited," he said. Everyone. That word landed heavy, though I didn't know why. When we pulled into the parking lot, I felt something flicker, a strange stillness. From the outside, Romano's looked exactly as it always did, warm lights, red awnings, the faint smell of garlic and basil drifting into the night. But tonight, it wasn't my workplace. Tonight, it was the stage. Mr. Romano spotted me through the window and waved. His smile was wide and proud, and for a moment, all my nerves vanished. This place had been my refuge, the one corner of the world where effort still mattered more than titles. If Margaret wanted to bring her little audience here, let her. I had nothing to hide. Inside, everything felt alive, the chatter of regulars, the clink of wine glasses, the laughter of waitstaff rushing between tables. Margaret sat in a corner booth, immaculate as ever, pearl earrings, champagne-colored blouse, posture like royalty. Emma was beside her, phone already in hand. When they saw me, their smiles looked too wide, too synchronized. "Happy birthday, dear," Margaret sang out. I leaned down to hug her. "Thank you," I said softly. Her perfume was sharp, citrus, and control. David slid in beside me, all smiles, all charm. "This is going to be great," he murmured. Margaret placed her manicured hand over mine. "You've been working so hard. We wanted to show how proud we are." Her eyes glimmered with something that wasn't pride. "Thank you," I said anyway. "That means a lot." As we ordered, I caught Emma whispering to her phone camera, probably filming some family celebration for her social feed. David kept glancing at Margaret. Each look between them tightened the air a little more. I didn't know it yet, but while I was admiring the way the candles flickered across our glasses, while I was rehearsing my little announcement in my head, they were rehearsing something too. Not love. Not reconciliation. A performance. The meal went by like a script, polite questions, fake laughter, surface warmth. And then, just as dessert arrived, Margaret turned to me with a smile that chilled me to the bone. "We have a special gift for you," she said, reaching into her purse. David lifted his phone. Emma hit record. The pink envelope gleamed under the light like a trick candle, beautiful, harmless, burning slow. "This," Margaret said sweetly, "is from all of us." I reached for it, smiling, unaware that I was holding the weapon they'd built for my public execution. But tucked in my purse, folded neatly beside my lipstick, was something far more dangerous. My freedom. Tomorrow they'd tell themselves they won. But they'd be wrong. Because in less than 5 minutes, their performance would collapse, and my life would begin. There are moments in life when time doesn't move forward, it just stretches, thin and trembling, before it breaks. That's what it felt like when Margaret held up the pink envelope, her smile as polished as the silverware reflecting candlelight. "This is from all of us," she announced. Her voice carried perfectly, clear enough for half the restaurant to hear. I thought it was a card, maybe even something sentimental, though that didn't sound like her. But then I saw David's phone tilted toward me, the little red recording light glowing. Emma leaned closer, her camera raised too, eyes bright with the kind of anticipation you only see before a crash. I should have known then. But part of me, the part that still wanted to believe in decency, hesitated. I took the envelope, fingers brushing the expensive paper. "It's beautiful," I said softly. Margaret's smile deepened. "Open it, dear." The paper tore easily under my thumb. Inside crisp white documents. The words "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage" stared up at me, black ink on cream paper. My mind went blank, then cold. For a second, even the air seemed to vanish. Around us, Romanos carried on laughter, plates clinking, the smell of roasted garlic and butter. But our booth became a vacuum. Every sound dulled, every color faded. All I could see were their faces. Margaret glowing with triumph, Emma biting her lip to contain a laugh, David nervous, fidgeting, but still recording. They wanted the collapse. They wanted the footage. They wanted to watch me shatter in HD. "Go on," Margaret said sweetly. "Say something." Her tone was a blade wrapped in velvet. I looked down again at the papers, then at the pen she had already placed beside the plate. They had planned everything right down to the signature. And that's when it happened, the strangest calm I've ever felt. It wasn't numbness, it was clarity. The kind that comes right before a storm turns in your favor. I picked up the pen. David's phone zoomed in, catching every movement. My voice, when it came, was steady. "Thank you," I said. "This is actually the most generous gift you could have given me." And then, with deliberate grace, I signed my name. Not trembling, not breaking, just free. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's smile twitched, confusion flickering, where victory had lived seconds before. David lowered the phone slightly. "Wait, that's it?" Emma blinked. "You're not upset?" I looked up at them and smiled, not cruelly, just peacefully. "Upset?" I said. "No, I've actually been waiting for this." Then, slowly, I reached into my purse and pulled out another envelope, white, folded neatly, official. "If we're exchanging paperwork tonight, I have something too." Margaret's brow furrowed as I unfolded the Grand Plaza letter. "This," I said clearly, "is my job offer. Guest Services Coordinator at Grand Plaza Hotel, $45,000 a year, full benefits, housing included." I laid the letter gently beside the divorce papers. Gasps rippled across nearby tables. Mr. Romano looked up from behind the counter. Maria peeked out from the kitchen window. Customers had begun to notice the way they do when something real cuts through the noise. Margaret's lips parted, but no sound came. Emma's phone trembled in her hand. David just stared, his own camera now pointed at the floor. "I got the offer 3 days ago," I continued. "The same day you started planning this little show." I smiled softly. "The timing's perfect, isn't it?" Then something unexpected happened, clapping. It started with Tony, the young busboy, his grin wide and genuine. Then Maria called out from the kitchen, "You go, Jennifer." The restaurant erupted in applause. Strangers, regulars, everyone who had ever seen me wipe tables, smile through exhaustion, and still mean it. Margaret's composure cracked, her eyes darting around, realizing the audience she'd invited had turned against her. David's cheeks burned red. Emma put her phone down at last, staring at the floor. "Jennifer," Mr. Romano said, stepping out from behind the counter, his apron dusted with flour. "You've made us proud. That hotel's lucky to have you." His words were warm, paternal, and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Thank you," I said, my voice trembling only now, not from fear, but from release. Margaret tried to recover. "This is absurd," she hissed. You're really going to just walk away from your marriage, from your responsibilities? I met her eyes calmly. No. I'm walking away from you. From your control. From a family that confuses cruelty for tradition. The crowd murmured. Someone muttered, "Good for her." David finally spoke, voice small. "So you knew?" I turned to him, the man who'd stood by, filming his wife's humiliation like it was entertainment. "I didn't know," I said softly. "But I should have. Because you stopped being my partner the day you started recording for her." He looked down. The silence between us was heavier than anger. I gathered both envelopes, one ending, one beginning, and stood. Margaret's hand shot out, as if to stop me. "Don't you dare make a scene." "Margaret," I said quietly, leaning just close enough for only her to hear. "You already did." And then I turned toward the door. The applause followed me like a benediction. Maria's voice rang out again. "Show them what freedom looks like, honey." Even Mrs. Patterson, my Tuesday regular, lifted her glass. "To Jennifer," she said, "and her bright future." I smiled through tears I hadn't realized were falling. The restaurant lights glowed soft and golden, and for the first time, I felt weightless. Every cruel word, every backhanded comment, every quiet humiliation, all of it dissolved behind me. Outside, the night air was cool and clean. I stood on the sidewalk under the neon Romano's sign, breathing in freedom. Somewhere inside, Margaret was probably still sitting in that booth, wondering how her masterpiece of cruelty had turned into her own public disgrace. She'd handed me divorce papers, and I'd signed them with joy. She thought she'd ended me. But she'd only cleared the path for my rebirth. The first morning after I walked out of Romano's, I woke to silence. No buzzing phone. No Margaret. No David pacing outside the bathroom door, asking if I'd ironed his shirt. Just birds outside the window, and sunlight spilling across the bed like forgiveness. I didn't cry. I just sat there, coffee cup in hand, realizing what freedom actually sounded like: the absence of expectation. The next week was a blur of beginnings. I packed 2 suitcases, clothes, my textbooks, and the framed picture of my late father, the only person who ever told me I could be anything. When the cab pulled up to Grand Plaza Hotel, I stared up at the building, all glass and light, rising above the ocean like a promise. Inside, everything gleamed. Marble floors, soft piano music, the kind of place where people whispered instead of talked. Jessica Martinez met me in the lobby, her hand warm, her smile genuine. "Jennifer," she said. "Welcome home." Home. It was the first time that word didn't sting. The job was demanding long hours, endless guests, constant problem-solving, but every challenge felt like proof that I'd survived worse. When customers shouted, I stayed calm. When coworkers complained, I smiled. Because after Margaret, nothing could shake me. Within 6 months, Jessica promoted me to assistant guest relations manager. I moved into the staff housing overlooking the water, my first apartment with a view that didn't face someone else's wall. Every night, I'd sit on the balcony, the city lights shimmering below, and whisper, "You did it." Word spread faster than I expected. A mutual friend told me that Margaret had shown up in court expecting to humiliate me again, but this time, the tables turned. The judge, unimpressed by her evidence and manipulation, granted me fair financial settlement. Apparently, she'd underestimated how documentation works when you've been recording every insult for years. David tried to contest the division, but by then, his reputation was already unraveling. A viral video of that dinner had made its way online. The internet had its own verdict. When you try to humiliate your daughter-in-law and end up exposing your own cruelty, karma served hot. I didn't post it. I didn't even share it. I didn't need to. Sometimes revenge doesn't need noise. It just needs time and truth. Months later, while preparing an event at the hotel ballroom, I heard a familiar voice at the reception desk. Low, sharp, dripping with authority. "Margaret." She stood there, pearls on, phone in hand, arguing with one of my staff about her reservation. Apparently, she hadn't realized who managed the department now. When I walked out from behind the counter, her words died mid-sentence. For the first time, Margaret looked small, not because I had power, but because she no longer did. "Jennifer," she whispered, her voice brittle. I smiled. Mrs. Walsh, welcome to Grand Plaza. Her eyes darted away, throat tightening. I didn't realize that I could build something? I finished gently. Neither did you, but here we are. I didn't gloat. I simply nodded to the staff. Make sure Mrs. Walsh is comfortable, and please no special treatment. Then I walked away. That night, as I locked up the office, Jessica found me smiling at the empty lobby. Good day? She asked. The best, I said. Sometimes the past walks through your door just to remind you how far you've come. She chuckled. Then you did come far. I looked out at the ocean, the moonlight rippling across the water. I didn't escape, I said softly. I evolved. Because that's the truth no one tells you about revenge. The sweetest kind isn't payback. It's peace. It's walking into the life they swore you'd never have, and realizing you don't even need them to see it. Margaret had her audience that night at Romano's. She wanted applause, but I got something far better. Freedom. And freedom doesn't fade when the clapping stops. So now, when guests at the hotel ask if I've ever been through hardship, I just smile and say, yes, but it taught me to run my own show. Because once upon a time, a woman tried to humiliate me on my birthday. And instead, she handed me my future.